Shalom. This week's Torah portion, we've got a double portion this week. So a double blessing this week. It's Matot, which is Numbers 30, verse 2 through chapter 32, verse 42. And the Haftarah for that is Jeremiah 2, 4 through 28, and chapter 3, verse 4. And the New Covenant portion there is Philippians 3, 12 through 16. The other portion that we have this week is Masei, and it's Numbers 33, 1 through 36, 13, which brings us to the end of Numbers this week. The Haftarah portion for that is Isaiah 66, verse 1 and 66, verse 23. And the New Covenant portion is James 4, 1 through 12. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. All right, starting right off in Numbers 30, with going back a little, one verses in last week's parasha, which was Pinchas, right? So Numbers 30, verse 1, Moses spoke to the princes of the tribes of Bnei Israel, saying, "This is what Adonai has commanded." And now we go into this week's parasha, Parashat Matot. Whenever a man makes a vow to Adonai or swears an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he is not to violate his word, but do everything coming out of his mouth. Suppose a woman in her youth vows to Adonai or obligates herself by a pledge in her father's house. If her father should hear her vow or her pledge with which she obligated herself, and her father says nothing to her, all her vows and every pledge by which she has obligated herself will stand. But if her father should forbid it on the day of his hearing it, none of her vows or pledges by which she has obligated herself will stand. Adonai will forgive her because her father has forbidden her. And the same thing concerning a husband over a wife. And I think it shows us just the protected place of that God has made for women, and that men have a place to take this authority and make sure that everything is in order in their home, and that their daughter or wife wouldn't be making a vow that would somehow not be good for them. So this also brings us to what's not in our portion, but in Matthew 5, verses 33 through 37. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall carry out your oaths to Adonai. But I tell you, do not swear at all, not by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make a single hair white or black, but let your yes be yes, and your no, no. Anything more than this is from the evil one." So really what Yeshua goes on to teach us is we don't need to make these oaths and vows unto the Lord. If we need something from God, we just need to go to him in prayer and ask, just like we would from any good father. Going on into chapter 31, the rest of this, until we get to the end of Numbers, is going to be a little bit of review of things we've already seen in Numbers. So in chapter 31, verse 1, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, "Take vengeance on the Midianites for Bnei Israel, and afterward you will be gathered to your people." And of course, you remember that in last week's portion, God told Moses that he was going to be gathered to his people. But before that, he's telling them he wants to bring forth vengeance on the Midianites. And why was that? Exactly what we read in that story about Bilam. In chapter 31, Numbers 31, verse 3, so Moses spoke to the people saying, "Mobilize some of your men for battle. They will go out against Midian to carry out Adonai's vengeance on Midian. Send into the battle 1,000 men from each of the tribes of Israel." So from the thousands of Israel, 1,000 from each tribe were assigned, 12,000 in all. Moses sent them into battle, 1,000 from each tribe, and with them Pinchas, son of Eleazar the Kohen, who took with him articles from the sanctuary and trumpets for signaling. This is so special to me because it shows that, like, the priests, they were so involved in the warfare together with the rest of Israel. Here is Pinchas going into war with the trumpets with him. Looking on in Numbers 31, verse 14, Moses was angry with this was after the battle. Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands, the commanders of hundreds, those returning from the campaign of the war. And Moses said to them, "You let all the women live? Why, they are the ones, because of Bilam's advice, who caused Bnei Israel to be unfaithful to Adonai in the matter of Peor, so that the plague was on the community of Adonai." So here God's really saying what the reason for the war was, that the Midianites had drawn the hearts of the children of Israel away from the Lord. And this made him angry because he wanted the hearts of the children of Israel. He wanted their love. He wanted their faithfulness. And still in Numbers 31, verse 21, Eleazar said to the men of the army who had gone to war, "This is the regulation of the Torah Adonai gave to Moses. The gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, lead, and anything able to pass through fire is to be put through the fire and will then be clean. It is also to be purified with the water of cleansing. Anything that cannot stand the fire is to be put through the water. You are to wash your clothes also on the seventh day. You will then be clean and may then come into the camp." And this is also, I think, so symbolic of our own lives, and that God is always wanting to purify us, wanting our lives to be clean before us, and that He is the purifying fire, cleansing us from all iniquity and all sin and making us into this beautiful, spotless bride. I want to just keep on in Numbers chapter 32. Starting in verse 1, the sons of Reuben and Gad had very large herds and flocks, and they saw that the territory of Yazer and Gilead were ideal for livestock. So the sons of Reuben and Gad came and said to Moses, Eleazar the Cohen, and the princes of the community, and I'm not going to list them, and this is what they said: "The territory that Adonai conquered before the community of Israel, it's suitable for livestock, and your servants have livestock." And then they said, "If we have found favor in your eyes, let this territory be given to your servants as a possession. Don't make us cross the Jordan." So here are the tribes of Reuben and Gad, and they've got all this livestock, and they say, "We want to stay on this side of the Jordan. Let this be our inheritance." Now, let's see what Moses says about that. In chapter 32, verse 6, Moses replied to the sons of Gad and Reuben, "Should your countrymen go to war while you dwell here? Why do you dishearten Bnei Israel from going across to the land that Adonai has given to them? Your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to look over the land. They went up to the valley of Eshcol and viewed the land, but they discouraged the hearts of Bnei Israel not to enter the land which Adonai had given them. The anger of Adonai was aroused that day, and he swore an oath, saying, 'The men who came out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward will not see the land I promised to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, for they have not followed after me with a whole heart, except Caleb, the son of Yefuneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, son of Nun, for they were wholehearted after Adonai.'" Well, I think there's so much in that too, because God was angry. What was the thing he was angry about? That certain people had discouraged the children of Israel from going in to take the land. And I just want to speak to us personally about this as well. How many times does it happen that you get something that discourages you from going in to do or to take what God has for you? I just want to encourage you to stay, to encourage your hearts in the Lord, and to go forth and do the things that God has called you to do and take the inheritance that He has for you. So what we do know is that they said, okay, we will go. We look at verse 20, in chapter 32, Moses said, if you will do this, if you will arm yourselves for battle for Adonai, and if all of you cross the Jordan until Adonai has driven his enemies from before him, and the land is subdued before Adonai, then afterward you may return and be free before Adonai and Israel, and then this territory will be your possession before Adonai. But if you don't do this, behold, you sin against Adonai. And in verse 25, the sons of Gad and Reuben said to Moses, your servants will do just as my Lord is commanding. Our children, our wives, our flocks, and our herds will remain here in the cities of Gilead, but your servants, everyone armed for battle, we will cross over for the war before Adonai, just as my Lord says. And that's exactly what they did. They went to war with the children of Israel, and they did get their inheritance on that side of the Jordan. All right, when we get to chapter 33, that's when we go into Matot-Masei. And it says these are Israel's journeys reviewed. And the truth is, that's exactly what it is. It's a review of everything, the whole journey from Egypt until they went to the promised land. Starting in verse 1, these are the journeys of Bnei Israel when they came out of Egypt by their divisions under the hand of Moses and Aaron. Moses recorded the stages of their journeys at Adonai's command. These are their journeys by stages. Bnei Israel set out from Ramses on the 15th day of the first month, the first day after Passover. They went out with a high hand in the sight of all Egypt. Now the Egyptians were burying those whom Adonai had struck down among them. Adonai had brought judgments on all their firstborn and their gods. So this part just starts with, of course, the Exodus, and then it goes from camp to camp to camp where they were in the desert. I want to go on to chapter 33, verse 50. Adonai spoke to Moses along the Jordan in the plains of Moab, across from Jericho, saying, speak to Bnei Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you must drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you. You must destroy all their idols and cast images and demolish their high places. You will take possession of the land, so you will settle in it, because I have given it to you to possess. You are to divide the land by lot according to your families. To the large, make their inheritance larger, and to the small, make their inheritance smaller. Whatever comes out of the lot will be theirs. You are to distribute the inheritance according to your ancestral tribes. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, whoever you allow to remain will become to you barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They will give you trouble in the land in which you will be living. Then what I had intended to do to them, I will do to you. So we know what happened, that they didn't drive out all of the enemies. And the reason God wanted them to do that is, once again, he wanted their hearts solely unto him, and he didn't want this idolatry in their midst. He wanted them to know and love their God and follow after him wholeheartedly. Chapter 34 in Numbers talks about the borders of Israel, and then we get to chapter 35. In verse 1, Adonai spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, command Bnei Israel to give to the Levites from the inheritance of their possessions cities in which to live. They are also to give the Levites pasture lands around the cities. Thus they will have cities to live in and pastures for their cattle, flocks, and all their livestock. And if we go down to verse 6, 6 of the cities you give to the Levites are to be cities of refuge, to which anyone who kills anyone may flee. Besides these, you are to give the Levites 42 more cities. In all, you are to give the Levites 48 cities with their pastures. And if you remember, the Levites did not get an inheritance because God said that he was their inheritance. But he did make a provision for them of cities to live in and pastures for their flocks to graze in. When we go into chapter 36, coming to the end of this, and we touched on this last week about the inheritance for the daughters of Zelophehad. And so in chapter 36, verse 10, Zelophehad's daughters did just as Adonai commanded Moses. Zelophehad's daughters, Machlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noah, married sons of their uncles. They married their cousins. They married within the families of the sons of Menashe, son of Yosef, and their inheritance remained within the tribe of their ancestral family. So that brings us to the end of the book of Numbers. And next week we'll be starting in Deuteronomy. I just want to leave with this verse in Jeremiah. This was from the Haftarah. And if we are in Jeremiah chapter 2, looking at verse 11, has a nation changed its gods, even though they are not gods? Yet my people have exchanged their glory for worthless things. Be appalled at this, O heavens. Be utterly horrified and dumbfounded. It is a declaration of Adonai. My people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and they dug their own cisterns, cracked cisterns that hold no water. And I think that these verses are so beautiful, and they reflect everything that just happened to the children of Israel, that God wanted a people whose hearts were solely committed to him, loving him, knowing his character, and forsaking all the idols and the things that would pull their heart away from him. I want to bless you today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Shalom.